Abdullahi Boru Halakhe. He is a senior officer of policy and advocacy in Africa at the International Rescue Committee. Talk to me about this effort by China. How do you view it?
Yeah, I think China is filling in a critical gap that really needs to be filled in. What a lot of people don't realize is that China has been doing this kind of work, particularly in the medical field, since most of the African countries got independent in 1963, when China sent 100 medical doctors to various African countries. During the Ebola outbreak, China also sent 1,000 medical officers, apart from giving in millions of dollars. And so this is one of those things that flies under the radar because it doesn't get a great deal of attention compared to China large-scale infrastructure, China aid, but food aid certainly is very important. Just to add, following the hurricane cyclone in southern part of the continent, that is in Malawi, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe, China pledged 7,500 tons of rice for Zimbabwe. So I think it's part of that tradition. So since 1960s and over the last few years, if you look at the actual numbers of aid from China towards Africa, it's been on the increase.
Jeffrey Sachs is this renowned economics professor, and he talks a lot about extreme poverty. And one of the things he says is it's pocket change for rich nations, that they should step up to the plate, they should do their part. Do you see China as doing that? I mean, it's gone through its own renaissance. I mean, it lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. I mean, it has its own past to look at as an example. Do you see them as kind of stepping up?
And that is exactly one of the things that get lost in all the debates. For a lot of African countries, most of them look at China and say, hey, just 2 decades ago, China was a third world country. Now it's a first world country. And the fact that China deals with most of these African countries as equal partners rather than dictating what some of these countries do tend to get a tremendous amount of resonance with most of these African countries. So China's history gives hope for most of these countries and say, hey, we could probably be the next Chinese if we put our houses in order.
It's interesting because I think about the United States, and one person that comes to mind, Paul O'Neill, who was in the Bush administration. I remember years ago him saying, look at all this money we've given to Africa. What do we have to show for it? This kind of return on investment approach, it seems like it's framing the argument in a different perspective than China. Should the United States be doing more?
Not just the United States. Most countries should be doing more, because a lot of the time what gets lost is a return on investment in a very empirical number terms. But if you're saving one life, you've saved so many. So in the 21st century, one person dying of hunger is a shame for all of us. And so most of these countries, like United States, because of domestic politics, there is a tendency to start saying, what is the rate of investment, return on our investment for all these aid that we're giving? But it's also soft power. You have to look at it, as a country. The more you give, the more people look at your country in very positive ways, and that can bring in business. I'm not suggesting in any way that people are dying, let's start giving aid so our business footprints could increase. No, far from that. But I think for the United States, it is also imperative. I mean, from a very moral perspective, the more you have, the more you give. I mean, nobody will want to feel better about themselves when they are seeing other people not, doing well, and you are doing extremely well. The amount of food waste in this country, and it's not just the United States, but many countries, that could save so much lives.
Yeah, income inequality, we talk a lot about it person to person, but
yes,
it's also countries to countries as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming in, really appreciate it. I know you're headed back to the continent in just next month, so thanks for stopping by.